students. So far we have studied different aspects of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. We have studied that pollination in flowering plants, especially in angiosperm, it is of two different types, autogamy and allogamy. Both the type of pollinations are having their own merits and demerits as well. But in case of self-pollination or autogamy, it is responsible for inbreeding depression, and that is nothing but formation of weaker and susceptible progeny. On the other hand, allogamy or cross-pollination is always better because it is responsible for formation of a strong progeny with variations and having important role in evolution. Most of the angiosperm, they used to produce bisexual flowers, but as a nature, all these plants always try to favor or always proceed for cross-pollination. And for that purpose, such plants used to develop certain modifications, certain adaptive structures so as to favor the cross-pollination. And all these adaptations and modifications are collectively considered as outbreeding devices. In this lecture, we are going to discuss different outbreeding devices seen in angiosperms in detail. Now, these outbreeding devices which are developed in the plants, that is for to favor the cross-pollination, and therefore outbreeding devices are also called as contrivances for cross-pollination. Now, these contrivances is nothing but making or forcing or the structure which is developed to favor the cross-pollination. They are called as outbreeding devices. By these adaptations and modifications, angiosperms are avoiding the self-pollination and favoring the cross-pollination. In this particular unit, we are going to discuss different contrivances for cross-pollination. In other words, you can also use a term, different types of outbreeding devices developed by the angiosperm. Let us see the list first, and then we are going to discuss one by one. The first outbreeding device or contrivance for cross-pollination which is developed is very well known, and it is called as dichogamy. The second one which we are going to discuss is self-sterility. The third one is called as dicliny or unisexuality. The fourth one is called as hercogamy. And the last one today we are going to discuss is heterostyly. So these are the different outbreeding devices, and let us see the first one, and that is called as dichogamy. In our previous lectures, we have already studied that dichogamy is the opposite term of homogamy. Homogamy is a term related with simultaneous maturing of both male and female reproductive structure. In such plants, stamens and carpels, they mature at the same time, and therefore homogamy is favorable for self-pollination. On the other hand, dichogamy, as it is the opposite term, in such conditions, stamens and carpels or anther and stigma, they do not mature simultaneously, they mature alternate to each other, and due to the non-simultaneous maturation of both the reproductive structure, self-pollination is avoided and cross-pollination is favored. So that concept is called as dichogamy. So dichogamy is mostly related with non-simultaneous maturation of a reproductive structure. in case of a typical bisexual flower of angiosperm, two reproductive structures are present. One is called as androecium, the male reproductive structure, and the second is called as gynoecium, the female reproductive structure. Now, in case of dichogamy, there are two subtypes which is related to the reproductive structure, the one which is maturing first, and on that basis, the two subtypes are as follows. One is called as protandry. The name itself is indicating which structure is going to mature first, because the maturation is non-simultaneous. So in such cases, androecium mature first, anthers mature first and release their pollen, and stigma or the carpel, it will mature later on after some duration, and therefore pollens of the same flower will not germinate on the stigma of the same flower, and in this way dichogamy is achieved. So the case where androecium mature first than that of gynoecium is called as protandry. The best example of protandry is helianthus. This plant is commonly called as sunflower. The second type of dichogamy is obviously protogyny. Here, the structure, the reproductive structure which matures the first is the gynoecium of the flower and followed by the androecium, and again self-pollination is prevented, name itself indicating the flower or the plant in which gynoecium mature before the androecium is called as protogyny, and by this way the dichogamy is achieved. Best example of protogyny is Michaelia. This plant is commonly known as champaka. In our language it is called as chafa or son chafa. So these two, protandry and protogyny, is related with dichogamy, that is non-maturation of both the reproductive structure simultaneously. They mature one after the other, and thereby they prevent the self-pollination and favors the cross-pollination. Such kind of protandry is also evident in case of animals. In your topic animal type or kingdom animalia you have already studied, you have to find out in which animal protandry is seen. This is the question for you. You have to find out the answer and give the answer in the comment section. The second outbreeding device we are going to discuss here is self-sterility or self-incompatibility. Now it means the pollen grains do not germinate on the stigma of the same flower. Listen again, this point is very important. In this case, pollen grains do not germinate on the stigma of same flower, and that's why it is called as self-sterility or self-incompatibility. The compatibility is nothing but matching, and incompatibility is non-matching. So the pollen grains are rejected to germinate on the stigma when they are from the same flower, and that condition is called as self-sterility or self-incompatibility. Now, self-sterility or self-incompatibility is the genetic mechanism. It is considered a genetic mechanism because self-sterility or self-incompatibility is controlled by a single gene, and the name of gene is gene S. This gene S is a multi-allelic gene. It means this gene is having various variations, different alleles are present, and those alleles are denoted as S1, S2, S3, S4, so on and so forth. There are many different alleles are seen, and therefore this gene is a multi-allelic single gene, and the name of gene is gene S. Now let us discuss how self-incompatibility or self-sterility is working. Suppose this is the gynoecium, the carpel seen in the flower. These are the other floral parts like petals and sepals. Stamens which are produced here. And pollen grains which are released by these stamens are deposited on the stigma like this. As male and female reproductive structure belong to the same flower present on the same plant, their genetics or their genome is same. Say for example, if the plant or the carpel is belong to S1, then the genotype of the flower related to self-incompatibility gene or gene S, it is same. Now when same kind of pollen grain is received by the stigma, such pollens are rejected to germinate on the stigma of same flower, and thereby self-pollination is naturally prevented and cross-pollination is favored. See another example. Suppose from any other source, from other type of flower, the pollen grain is reaching up to the stigma and it is residing on the stigma. And this pollen, it belongs to some other allelic composition of the gene S. Say for example, it is S2. Now this S2 type of pollen is settling on the stigma. Now it is quite different than that of the basic genotype of the carpel. It is having S1 and the pollen, it belongs to S2 type of allele of gene S. So such pollen is accepted and it will allow to germinate to form the pollen tube, and therefore self-pollination is avoided and cross-pollination is followed, and therefore it is also considered as outbreeding device. Now this pollen S2 will produce the pollen tube in the carpel belonging to S1 and successfully fertilizes the ovum. This is the second type and we call it as self-sterility, because pollen grain of the same flower will not allow on the stigma of the same flower. It is also called as self-incompatibility. The third outbreeding device is called as declining, or it is called as unisexuality. So as to prevent the self-pollination, different plants they used to produce unisexual flowers. But on the basis of occurrence of the unisexual flower on the plant, there are two different types of plants. Say for example, monoecious and dioecious. Now what is the monoecious plant? In these kind of plants, male flower and female flower, they born separately but present on the same plant, and therefore it is called as monoecious plant. We can take the example of, the best example is of castor. This castor is a monoecious plant in which male flower born at the higher level like this. So these flowers are male flowers and the female flowers are present separately but on the same plant below the male flowers. So these flowers quite large in size. These are the female flowers. Now these male and female flowers, they are separate and therefore they strictly prevent the autogamy. But there are some chances of geitonogamy because pollen from these flowers are transferred to the neighboring flower. So partly they are preventing the self-pollination and favoring the cross-pollination. So in case of monoecious plant, autogamy is prevented but geitonogamy may occur. The example is castor. Second type of plant we are going to discuss, and that is called as dioecious plants. In case of dioecious plants, male and female flowers are separate. It means they are showing unisexuality, or declining condition is seen there also. But these flowers, these male and female flowers, they born separately on different plants, on two different plants, and therefore these plants are called as dioecious plants. The best example of dioecious angiospermic plant is papaya. In papaya, male and female plants are different. So on one plant there is male flower and on another plants there are female flowers. And therefore, in case of dioecious condition, self-pollination, whether it is autogamy or geitonogamy, both are successfully prevented and only cross-pollination is followed. This type of modification is called as unisexuality, or another term used for the same is called as declining. And here the examples are present. Monoecious plant, the castor is very well known example, and for dioecious plant, papaya is the best example. The next type for contrivance of for cross-pollination is hercogamy. In this term, the hercos, it means barrier. So in hercogamy, the flowers used to develop the mechanical barrier between the male and female reproductive structure of the same flower. And due to presence of these mechanical barriers, the self-pollination is prevented and cross-pollination is followed. The best example of hercogamy is Gloriosa. In common English, it is also called as glory lily. So in such flowers, the structure is quite like this. This is the carpel and these are the perianth lobes. So the female reproductive structure is present here and the male reproductive structure, that is anthers, those are present in this particular position. Now there is a mechanical barrier of perianth lobe between male and female reproductive structure of the same flower, and due to this mechanical barrier or hercos, the self-pollination is prevented and cross-pollination is followed. The last type of outbreeding device we are going to discuss is called as heterostyly. The term heterostyly means the filament of stamens and style of the carpel, they are of different length, so that both the reproductive structure or receptive structure of androecium and gynoecium, they are not coming in contact with each other. This particular condition is responsible for avoiding the self-pollination and favoring the cross-pollination. Let us discuss it in a diagrammatic way. Suppose this is a flower. In this flower, carpel is situated like this. This one is ovary, this is style, and this is the stigma. But in the same flower, the stamens are situated like this. They are having a very short length of filament, and due to which the pollens of this flower is not always directly coming in contact with the stigma of the same flower. This differential length of the filament and style, this is different, and this differential length is considered as heterostyly. Other case we are going to discuss, and it is like this. In some species, the condition is like this. This one is the stigma, this is the style, this is the ovary. So here, length of the style is very short. On the other hand, the stamens which are produced by the flower, they are having a very long filament. So anthers are present out of the flower. Those are extruding out of the flower. So reproductive structures are not coming in contact with each other due to differential length of filament and the style. This is called as heterostyly. Heterostyly is seen in variety of different plants. The best examples are oxalis. In our language it is called as ambuti. And one more example is primrose. So these are the examples of heterostyly showing angiospermic plants. Let us summarize the different types of outbreeding devices with respect to their examples. First one is called as dichogamy, that is related with non-simultaneous maturation. In that, protandry, androecium matures first, example is sunflower. Protogyny, gynoecium matures first, and that is, the example is mycelium. Self-sterility, which is the genetic mechanism related with multi-allelic single gene S, and self-sterility is most commonly seen in orchids. Third one is called as dicliny. We also call it as unisexuality by producing dioecious or monoecious condition. Best example for dioecious condition is papaya, and for monoecious condition it is castor. Hercogamy, by means of producing mechanical barriers. The best example is Gloriosa, and the last one is heterostyly, is related with different lengths of filaments and styles present in the same flower, and the best examples are oxalis and primrose. This part, what we call it as outbreeding devices or contrivances for cross-pollination, is very commonly asked you for the question like short note in your board exams, and for your NEET exams, many important questions can be asked in this content. So read this carefully, listen the lecture very carefully, because this part is carrying a good weightage in your competitive exams.